My name is Harry. Has anybody ever noticed that Donald Trump is only doing entertainment? He's not telling any truths. He's like a Dave Chappelle or any other comedian that you listen to. And that's why those people love him. They're not worrying about what he's saying. They love the entertainer that he is. And that's my opinion. Thank you.
It's Friday, October 23rd, just 11 days from the election, and all the plexiglass in the world can't take away the pain. Ugh. Today is Debate Recap Day on Vote for America, and we'll be doing the weekly roundtable with the Lincoln Project's own Mike Madrid and Susan Del Percio. We'll also be talking with a Lincoln voter from Florida who is making a difference in this election. And now, our host, Lincoln Project co-founder, Jennifer Horn.
And welcome to Vote for America on LPTV. I'm so happy that you are with us today. And this is just a quick reminder that from now until Election Day, we're going to be with you 5 days a week at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We're so glad that you're here. We always want to make sure that you have all the information that you need to make your voice heard in this election. So we're going to start today like we always do and make sure that you have all the updated information on voter registration deadlines. If you live in Utah, your voter registration deadline is the 23rd. In Iowa, in Massachusetts, it's the 24th. In Colorado and Montana and Washington, it is the 26th. In Connecticut, it's the 27th. If you are not registered, you cannot vote. And I know you know how important it is that you be able to vote this year and make sure that your vote is counted. You can go to vote.org to find out if you're registered or not. And now here's some quick updates on where voting has opened as well. A quick reminder, absentee ballot mail-in voting, I believe, is open in all 50 states at this point. In the great state of New York, you can start early in-person voting on October 24th. So we want to make sure that you have all that information and that you get your vote cast. It's so important. As always, very happy to welcome my co-host this morning. She's the co-founder of the Marin Group and the Lincoln Project's resident independent voter. Lisa, it's great to have you with us today. So what's on your mind? What is top of mind for you this morning?
Well, thank you, Jennifer. It's great to be here. So the debate was last night, and it was the first. We talked about the horrific family separation policy that the Trump administration has had, but last night was the first time we heard directly from Donald Trump and Joe Biden discussing that policy and these 545 children who will likely never be reunited with their parents. Let's go ahead and take a look at that.
What happened? Parents were ripped, their kids were ripped from their arms and separated. And now they cannot find over 500 sets of those parents, and those kids are alone. Nowhere to go. Nowhere to go. It's criminal. It's criminal.
Let me ask
Kristen,
you about
I will say this. They went down, we brought reporters, everything. They are so well taken care of. They're in facilities that were so clean.
So there were several things that Donald Trump said last night that were absolutely not true about this policy. First, this policy began with him. There was not a family separation policy conducted prior to the Trump administration like this. Last night he said it was coyotes and child traffickers who were mostly bringing these kids over the border that are now without their parents. That's absolutely not true. The government records show that these kids came to the border with their parents. They were taken away from their parents, many of them under 5 years old when it happened. So absolutely not true. Trump said that the administration is working very hard to find the parents. Not true at all. There are independent organizations who are down in Central America trying to relocate these parents who were deported without their kids. The Trump administration is not trying to reunite them. And the most egregious one is for him to say that the children were very well taken care of. I don't know what Donald Trump's childhood was like or how he raised his kids, but being stuck on concrete floors covered with Mylar blankets and having government contractors watching over you from a watchtower is not my idea of taking care of children very well. So, I don't know how we got ourselves into the mess that we're in, but the conditions on the border that these children were in, the American Academy of Pediatrics said that this was government sanctioned child abuse. And Physicians for Human Rights, which they have won a Nobel Prize, they said that the way the US is treating those children meets the UN qualifications for torture. So we have had a policy of torturing children at the border under Donald Trump. So again, I don't know how we got ourselves into this mess. I do know the way we get ourselves out of it is by voting for Joe Biden and making sure that he is in the Oval Office come the end of January.
For sure, and it certainly highlighted the dramatic difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. I tweeted out last night in the middle of this tweet this great line that Joe Biden had. He said, "You know his character, you know my character. The character of the country is on the ballot." And my tweet was game over. You saw over 12,000 people as of I don't know how long ago uh, in agreement on that. I do think that this is a question of character. That the character of the country is on the ballot, and I think that the actions of this administration, the ones that you just highlighted, Lisa, in particular, I think that's really moving people, and I think it has moved people to the point in this election where they are really looking in their hearts in these last few days leading up to the election, and looking at these two men through that perspective. And to talk a little bit more about what happened at the debate last night, as well as the state of the race overall, I am really pleased to have our kind of our roundtable. I guess it's become sort of a traditional thing here. On Fridays, we're doing these roundtables now. We have Susan Del Percio. She's a senior advisor to the Lincoln Project and a longtime political strategist. Susan, welcome. I'm so happy that you're with us today.
Great to be with you.
It is great to have you. And also, of course, my friend and fellow Lincoln Project co-founder. He is the data master, the analysis wizard, as they call him behind the scenes here, Mike Madrid. Mike, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
It is great to have you here. Let's start with, I'll ask both of you just to kind of give me your top line debate analysis. Good, bad, indifferent, ugly, win, lose. Mike, we'll start with you. What did you think last night?
I don't think anything really fundamentally changed the trajectory of the race. I think if Donald Trump benefited, it was a benefit basically of low expectations. There have been very few times in this presidency where he has actually gone in unscripted and actually overperformed. And by overperformed, I mean he didn't light his hair on fire and stomp around like a child and kind of make a spectacle of himself. And so I guess if that's a victory, then that's probably what he did. Most of the survey work, basic and cursory, suggested that Joe Biden probably won this debate. But at this late in the election cycle, I really don't think that much of what was going to happen, especially if you're having a somewhat substantive debate on policy, is going to change anybody's minds. Most undecided voters this late in the game are looking more for style than for substance. It's not policy prescriptions that are going to sway voters. Biden did nothing to hurt his cause. I think he actually performed quite well last night. And I think we'll probably see maybe some very small volatility around the race for the next 72 hours. And then it will set into its trajectory for the remainder of the election cycle. Probably no change, no meaningful change in terms of public opinion.
Well, talk to me for a second, Mike, before we move on about undecided voters. It's, we're always at this point in the election. That's who we're focused on. We know that for the most part, people have decided what they're going to do. Is our undecided voters a real thing?
They are a real thing, but they're a very small fraction of kind of what remains at this point. Again, as you know, Jennifer, we've talked about this, you and I. This has been one of the most historically stratified races in the history of modern presidential politics, meaning most voters have been decided for the better part of many, many months, and I would argue years. There's not much of a change that's going to happen, but for those fraction of voters that are still undecided, there's two things that I'm looking at. First is the likelihood and the history of undecided voters going into the last couple of weeks of a campaign overwhelmingly break for the challenger. That's usually because if you've had almost 4 years as the incumbent to close the deal and seal the deal with these voters, you would have already done so by now. The fact that they are undecided this late in the game probably means they are more disposed to change. And that is frankly what we know historically undecided voters have voted for. We also know that Joe Biden has much higher positives than negatives amongst these undecided voters, and frankly amongst all independent voters. They're of course different, but undecided voters view Joe Biden more favorably. And as I mentioned, most undecideds are not really looking through a policy prescription lens. They're looking for character, and they're looking for a stylistic lens. And so on both of those metrics, we would suggest, because the evidence is there, that these were likely to break at least more than halfway for Joe Biden, probably and potentially considerably more.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I'm always interested in that idea of the undecided voters and where they're going to head. And Susan, maybe you want to build on that thread as, tell me what you thought about last night in whatever detail that you want, winner, losers. But in particular, did we see anything last night that you think for those folks who are truly undecided might move them?
Probably not. I think what probably benefited Donald Trump is that he didn't necessarily turn away some of his wavering supporters, some of those who are still fairly with him but could turn at the last minute. I wouldn't call them quite undecided. But then there's another group besides undecided voters that we traditionally think of. They don't know which candidate to vote for. I think when it comes to independent voters who might be leaning towards Trump, we may see them not vote at all, because they really cannot bring themselves to vote for Joe Biden. They're strong Republicans, but they know that they cannot support Donald Trump. And that Donald Trump.
Hang on, before you go on from there, those folks then, the ones that you're saying that they just can't bring themselves to vote for Joe Biden, so they're probably thinking about staying home. Is there anything that could happen in the next 11 days that would change their minds to get them to go out and vote for Joe Biden?
Well, if you would have asked me that 3 weeks ago, I said, oh, well, Donald Trump could get COVID. So anything could happen.
Right.
Anything could happen. I don't know. Perhaps a big change in the market. Something would have to be dramatic, though. I think that there are those people who just won't vote for Biden, but really cannot vote for the president either. And I think that's more likely on those, like I said, the right-leaning independents or the Republicans who are just so unhappy with Donald Trump. But the biggest thing Trump did was not turn off more potential voters for himself. I think Joe Biden did a very good job in holding his line. He kind of did mess up a little bit on the oil question. He'll clean it up today, I think. But other than that, I think they offered who they were. And that's what we saw in this debate. We saw two people, one who actually puts thought into what his policies are, and another who actually just never cared about policies or issues and just says what's on the top of his mind. The exception is this time versus last, he didn't interrupt as much, but then again, there was a mute button.
Right. I think he was scared of what it would look like to have himself cut off in the middle of one of his crazy rants. So that was actually, you just gave me the perfect segue for what was going to be one of my other questions. Let's step beyond the debate a little bit. And Mike, I'll go to you on this one. So Joe Biden last night talked about fracking, and he talked about transitioning, out of oil completely at some point in the future. The Lincoln Project is playing a little bit in Texas right now. We know things are kind of volatile in Pennsylvania right now. Those are two issues that are going to, will those, I was going to make a statement, but it's more of a question. Will those issues, do you think, move the voters in those two states that we're following so closely?
Well, look, I don't want to suggest that they won't, but what we do know is this about single issue voters generally, energy issue voters specifically. There's a very good chance that you're predisposed to vote for or against one of the candidates based off of fracking. You're probably already there. Like I said, and it's not just fracking, it's essentially any issue at this point. If you're looking for that significant a policy difference where Joe Biden is saying, I'm not going to ban fracking, and Donald Trump says, yeah, you are, I think the variance of the type of voter that is actually going to be swayed by that is probably predisposed to be with the Republican candidate or Donald Trump specifically. So where this might be potentially problematic, of course, would be in West Texas, in the more conservative areas of Pennsylvania, and in Eastern Ohio. I'm not concerned about it. Again, I'm sure it will be polled, probably overpolled dramatically because we're looking for these differences and we're looking for these variations. There isn't a single poll out there in the last year and a half that has suggested that energy issues have been a top 5 issue when we're in the midst of a global pandemic that is taking tens of thousands of lives every month, and I think we're upward over 1,000 lives a day. The issue of the pandemic is absolutely overwhelming everything else. So there's going to be a very marginal number of voters that may move one way or the other on this. I just don't see it having a material effect on the race.
So then what about, let's start looking at some other states as well then. Susan, we just saw yesterday morning, I think it was the Morning Consult, I'm not sure. They were talked about Georgia, where the president and the vice president were neck and neck. I think it was 49-49 in Georgia, of all states. first of all, what's your sense of the game? Do you think that that's accurate? And then secondly, like, what does that say? If the Republican candidate is tied with the Democrat in Georgia, what does that tell us?
Well, it is hard for me just to wrap my head around that after 30 years of looking as a Republican taking Georgia. I mean, that's tremendous in itself. It also does tell me that if it happens, and I'm not sure it's as close as the polls say, but if come election night, and that's a state we could get back pretty early, if that's the case, I think that will be the beginning of a wave election in Joe Biden's favor, without question. I mean, if Georgia goes, then we may actually not have to worry about Florida or Pennsylvania, because we could have results from Georgia and Arizona and a few other states that just eliminate a path for President Trump, which would be actually very good news, I think, for the health of our country. But and I think Mike makes a very good point about single issue voters. This probably wouldn't be one typically, but for places like Pennsylvania, it is an economic issue more than it is an environmental issue, which is kind of where the vice president took it. The other thing I noticed, which could affect a state greatly like Georgia, is that Joe Biden did some things to motivate turnout among his potential supporters. He was able to, for example, where Hillary Clinton fell short is with African-American communities throughout Michigan, Wisconsin, throughout the country. And he actually acknowledged that Black Lives Matter in a way. He talked about the talk that Black families have to have with their children. And just recognizing it, I think, makes him definitely more appealing to a certain group of voters who say, what do I have in common with these two? Why should I go out and vote? He at least says, I'm listening to you. And that's what voters want to hear most. Right. Donald talks at us. He doesn't listen to us.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that as I was kind of putting my thoughts together for this conversation today. Mike, I thought Joe Biden was actually pretty powerful when he talked about Black Lives Matter and the talk. And that is a demographic that we've heard is not coming in, maybe up until now has not been coming in as strongly for Biden as he needs him to, or as we would expect him to. So talk to me about it from both perspectives. One, statistically, from the data side, how important is it that Joe Biden needs to perform better amongst people of color than we're seeing so far in the polls? But then also kind of from the personal, the emotional side, did he hit his mark last night in those comments about the talk and the difference between how he raised his children and what African American families have to confront when they're raising their children?
Yeah, two great questions and two very distinct ones. For the first, again, the people of color question, these voters have always been an important consideration, especially after we looked at the dust settling in the 2016 election cycle. I want to make this very clear, however. Black voters are not Latino voters, and Latino voters are not Black voters. And Democrats found that very clearly in the Democratic primaries after Joe Biden won commandingly in South Carolina by numbers bigger than Barack Obama actually won it in his primaries, and then a week later lost the Latino vote in the southwestern United States. So it's very important that we draw these distinctions, but your point remains the same as what is turnout going to look like? Look, Black turnouts dropped 3% for Hillary Clinton, and that 3% was undeniably the margin of victory in states like Pennsylvania and Michigan, arguably North Carolina. All indications from every special and regularly scheduled election since 2016 have suggested a very robust, probably historic African-American turnout, undeniably will benefit Joe Biden and the Biden campaign and Democrats down ticket. Latino voters, again, will also have a historic turnout. In fact, this November in 2020, the projection is that Latino voters will surpass Black voters as the second largest ethnic voting group in America, right behind white voters, and growing at a clip of about 2% a year. The challenge becomes the states where they are overrepresented will have the most dramatic difference. States like Florida, where the Cuban vote is consolidating and overperforming for Donald Trump and the Republicans, and states like Texas, where we're seeing numbers around 35, even upwards of 37% with Hispanic voters for Donald Trump. If those numbers hold, even with a robust turnout, Texas starts to push out of reach a little bit. Now, if Biden can get those numbers back into a traditional range of a 28 to 33% trajectory. Texas looks very, very good for Joe Biden, depending again on how robust and how historic the turnout numbers are going to be. As a character question, I think this is important for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
It's for those soft Republicans, which I know you have been focused on like a laser beam, specifically college-educated and suburban women who are looking more for character than they are necessarily for policy positions from their candidates at this point. The question is, are there enough women to still be had? Because so many women have shifted over the course of the past 3 years, and most recently in the past 6 or 7 months. We're actually seeing non-college educated white women moving considerably away from Donald Trump. First time we've seen that in 4 years. And again, these are not policy differences. These are issues of character. So the question you ask, I think, is the right one, is did Joe Biden hit on all cylinders with these demographics, saying I'm just kind of a better person, or I'm not a bad person, which is not difficult to do when you're sharing a stage with Donald Trump. And I would have to say yes. I think that vignette, that anecdote, I think was perfect to drive home his personal story, suggest to voters that may be wondering who he's going to be, that he's the right person at the right time to heal this nation from a faltering economy where people are suffering, from a global and national pandemic where people are dying, and from the racial discord that we've seen or have not seen the likes of which in the last 40 years.
All right. So then before we move on to the Senate, let me ask you one more quick presidential question, Mike. Is Texas really in play? I know
Texas
that
is really
the
in play,
Lincoln
but I want
Project
to be
is
really
playing
clear
there a
about
little.
Yeah, Texas is really clearly in play, but I do want to set the expectations. And again, probability and the actual outcomes often look very disparate. I would suggest that there's a 40% chance that Joe Biden could win this race. It's not just because of Donald Trump. If you look back, going to John McCain in 2008, who won the state by about 15 points, Mitt Romney wins the state by about 11 points. Donald Trump wins it by 9 points. Beto O'Rourke loses to Ted Cruz by 2.5 points in the midterm elections. This state, like many states, has been trending towards the Democrats for some time. We are in the midst of a political realignment based off of the demography of this country. And so while Donald Trump has hit the accelerator on this, this is not a new dynamic. Texas has been moving into play for at least the past 10 years. I think that Joe Biden stands a very good chance of getting this on election night. But if not, Texas will be a blue state, if not in 2 years, 4 years hence. But I think there's a very good chance. Less than 50-50, but a very good chance that Biden could win this on Tuesday, November the 3rd.
Yeah, and that's what it goes to, isn't it? Like if he's winning Georgia, if he's winning Texas, for gosh sakes, like we've been saying all along at the Lincoln Project, that if Biden can pick up Florida on election night, it's all over. But the truth is, if he picks up Texas, Georgia, starts adding some of those others, it's the same thing. Where can he win if he can't win in Georgia? So, Susan, let's shift a little bit and talk about Senate races here. Let's say that Arizona, Colorado, and Maine get picked up by the Democrats. How many do they need to take control of the Senate? Is it 5? Where else might they find some pickups?
Well, it's a pickup of 5 because we look at Doug Jones probably losing in Alabama. So you have to, if you want to pick up 5 because you're losing one for a net of 4. Right. So I think you add Iowa. I think Joni Ernst is in a whole lot of trouble. She had a horrible debate. Her numbers have been down there. She is in big, big trouble. And that's where I would first look. I've been kind of into Iowa for a while and watching it because it is turning. And then we see other states. Obviously, North Carolina is a place where a lot of people are looking. But if Georgia's in the situation it is, Georgia first, because they have 2 seats up. They have one as a regular scheduled Senate race and then a special election. But the Purdue Ossoff race, that could be very interesting. Now, of course, you have to get to 50, so it could end up being a runoff situation. But that's something I'm also looking at. But number 4 is Iowa. I'm curious what Mike thinks the 5th one could be.
Okay, so Mike, before you tell me what you think the 5th one should be, and I want to know, let's go back to Georgia just for a second. If in a state like Georgia, if the Senate seat goes Democrat at that second step on the ballot, how likely is it that the top of the ballot would not go Democrat? I mean, I know it usually goes down from there, but
Yeah, yeah. Look, Georgia shouldn't surprise us for the same reasons that Texas shouldn't surprise us. This is not just a Trump anomaly. Georgia has been trending this way for a long time, and we've been talking about this for many months at the Lincoln Project, okay? I'm not the least bit surprised that Georgia is in contention the way that it is for three main reasons. The first is we have a disproportionate number of college educated white voters. This has been a key constituency in the Republican base. Second, large number of 65 plus voters, seniors, directly impacted by COVID. And the third is there's a significant number of African American voters. Let's remember in the midterm election, Stacey Abrams probably won that race. If she didn't, she lost it by less than 0.5%. This was, Georgia, like all the Sun Belt states, have been trending towards a more centrist position. So this is not anomalous. This is a trend line. And so I'm very bullish on Georgia. I have been for some time. I'm not surprised by it. I also don't necessarily think this is an indicator of something broader. I don't also believe, I would push back a little bit, I don't think that you can win without Pennsylvania. Okay. If Donald Trump wins Florida and Pennsylvania, it means he's also won North Carolina. That means he's got a roadmap to winning this thing. The roadmap around those three states is extremely slim for Joe Biden. He's going to have to pick up at least Pennsylvania, which I've been very bullish on for some time. North Carolina, less so. Florida, of course, is a toss-up, but it's why we've been so heavily invested in Pennsylvania and why we, in the last week, have made a very serious resource allocation and big decision to move into Georgia, is we feel good about the trend line, and we think it's moving in our direction.
Okay, so assuming you agree with Susan about Joni Ernst in Iowa being number 4 pickup for the Senate, where do you think the Democrats have the best chance for a 5th?
I think you got to look at Montana as a very real pickup opportunity. I think Alaska, because we've been vested there for some time, it might be a little bit out of reach, but it's definitely doable. We're actually even looking at Espy in Mississippi. Bollier in Kansas is a 4-point race. This is Kansas, okay? We're seeing dramatic deterioration in the Republican base. So that is really spreading, I think, the battlefield map quite extensively. So, look, I think the typical ones that we all know, the McSally in Arizona is gone. Gardner, I think Colorado is gone. Tillis is probably going to be going away. Collins, I think, is in deep trouble. But I think Susan is right. In Iowa, we went in there a week ago, seeing the movement there. I think Iowa will be a pickup for Greenfield and the Democrats. But there's still 4 or 5 seats that could be toss-ups. And my guess is you're going to see a couple of surprises on election night.
I love it. So really the influence, it's what stays steady, it seems, and maybe it's just to degrees. The top of the ticket, really, we see it bleed down with Donald Trump in so much trouble against Joe Biden, with him being in such a precarious position with the American people. It's starting to impact all these other Senate races where we wouldn't have expected to see it. Mike, I know that you have somewhere else you have to be today. I'm really grateful for you joining us. As always, it's fascinating. I think people loved to understand behind it all. I think Susan's going to stay with us for 1 or 2 more questions. But thanks so much for being with us, Mike.
Yeah, you're in good hands with Susan. Thank you guys for having me. We'll be back before the election comes up. Thank you.
Great. Take care. So, Susan, I love talking to Mike. I mean, it's so, he takes all this. My side of politics is the persuasion and the how to messaging, how to talk to this voter, how to talk to that voter. And whenever I talk to Mike, it's like getting behind the scene and understanding the data behind it. I just find it fascinating and informative. I want to talk to you about something that kind of wraps together this whole conversation we've had with Mike, starting from the debate all the way into the Senate. The way that the degree to which the presidential race is influencing these Senate races. And that is, we so frequently in politics say that when it comes right down to it, these last couple of weeks, it's about the economy, stupid. I feel like that's not really the case this year, that we're in this somewhat unique environment where it's about the character, stupid. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're right. Mostly because of the damage that Donald Trump has done to our institutional norms. You've heard me say this a million times, Jennifer, but I believe it. The damage that Donald Trump has put into the Department of Justice through the congressional oversight, he was impeached. I mean, now all of these things have put cracks in the pillars of our democracy, but we haven't tumbled down yet. And I think that people know we cannot have another term of Donald Trump, because that will tumble us down, because he is destroying the character of our nation, both domestically and abroad, how people look at us. And we don't want to be that kind of country. And I think that is the overriding theme. I think that's such a great observation, because you're right. We always say the economy. And yes, the economy matters, but character matters more, because how are we going to recover? In what way are we going to do it together? And I think that that's just such a great point.
Yeah, and I think we saw that on display last night, maybe more so than normal. And maybe it's because there's such a disparity in the level of character that each of these candidates bring to the table. One of the lines that really has maybe will stay with me for the rest of my life was when they were talking about COVID. And part of Donald Trump's answer was, we have to learn to live with it. And this after from a guy who has just been completely dismissive of the danger that this poses for us as a nation, and dismissive of the value of the lives that have been lost. So to hear him say, we just have to learn to live with it, I was stunned. And I think that goes to what you were just talking about with character.
Yeah, and to that point, what was Biden's follow-up? No, we're dying of it. Over 200,000,
Right.
almost 225,000 people, lives lost. We have died. There's projected hundreds of thousands more to die. And Donald Trump offers, oh, you got to figure out how to live with it. No, we can't. And it's ironic that today is the highest number of COVID cases reported, breaking the July record at topping over 75,000 cases. We are not moving in the right. 75,000 cases today. Donald Trump does not care if people live or die. He talks about those numbers as if he's talking about the stock market. They are meaningless. And that is the character issue. That is like, no, we matter as a nation. Our principles matter. Donald Trump can't understand that because he has none. He has no core values. And you know what, Jennifer, if we want to disagree a little bit on how to get the economy going, so be it. But we shouldn't disagree on the character of who we are as a nation.
We should be able to enter these conversations about the economy and healthcare and energy independence and climate change. We should be able to have these conversations without worrying about whether or not the President of the United States is lying to us about the safety and well-being of the people. That's what it's all about. Susan?
I was just going to add, when Mark Meadows announced yesterday that Donald Trump took a COVID test and it was negative, I tweeted out, I don't believe it. I cannot believe anything comes from this administration. And that is devastating to who we are.
And when you can't believe them about life or death, you're at a point that we rarely face in this country. Susan, it has been terrific having you here. Susan Del Percio. Hopefully we'll have you back again soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So that's the debate chat from last night. It goes. They both kind of went back to exactly where you and I started this whole conversation this morning, Lisa. It's about character. Whether we're talking about COVID, whether we're talking about corruption, whether we're talking about paying bounties on the heads of our children who serve in the military to defend our nation. Whatever the topic is, it comes back to character in this race. And for me, actually, as much as it's a little bit of a surprise because it is outside the norm, it's kind of encouraging, isn't it, that the American people, the thing that we are coming together on is that we care about the character of our president.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. That is very encouraging. The last section of your conversation with Susan was so interesting because I think this is the first time we've ever had a president of the United States whose character was responsible for tanking our economy. Right. And it's a weird thing to connect together, but it is his willingness to allow COVID-19 to spread and 225,000 Americans to die, and to absolutely refuse to change course because it would mean admitting that he had made a mistake in the way that he was handling the pandemic, and we all know we cannot get the economy back on track until we get the pandemic under control. And he has absolutely no interest in doing that. He wants to go for, herd immunity. And we know we're talking about a couple million people a year would die if we went with that approach.
Exactly. And and I just saw something really interesting since you brought up herd immunity. The idea behind herd immunity is not that you just let the disease run rampant among the people until we have all become immune to it by catching it. The idea behind herd immunity is still that you advance the vaccine as aggressively and as quickly and widely as possible as we go through this whole thing. There's one of the doctors talked about this earlier this week on another show, that herd immunity is founded in vaccine work as well. So it's just another case of how dishonest and I don't know if the president's dishonest about herd immunity or if he's just ignorant. But to hear people talk about, you have to let us live our lives. Yeah, one does not exclude the other. You're right. So, Lisa, I know you have some important reminders for us today as well.
I do. You folks have been so wonderful about getting your hashtag Vote for America selfies posted to or tweeted onto Twitter. We want to go ahead and share some of those because they have been so much fun to see as they've all been coming in. As you can see, we have folks from all walks of life. They're coming from all over the country. And if it's not enough that we have humans getting involved in the hashtag Vote for America selfie, we're also very lucky that we now have dogs weighing in and making sure that they are being recognized for their participation and their encouragement of their humans to get out and vote. So keep those coming too. We love pet pictures. So it's a nice little bit of levity in what is a challenging time right now. So yeah, we love dog pictures. We are going to take a quick break, and on the other side, we are going to speak with our next guest.
There's mourning in Florida. Today, hundreds of thousands of Americans have died from a deadly virus Donald Trump ignored, praising China's response instead of heeding the warnings, then blaming them to cover his own failures. With the economy in shambles, people across Florida are still out of work. One of the worst economies in decades. This afternoon, millions of Americans will apply for unemployment. And with their savings run out, many are giving up hope. Millions worry that a loved one won't survive COVID-19. There's mourning in Florida, and under the leadership of Donald Trump, our state is weaker and sicker and poorer. And now, Americans are asking, if we have another 4 years like this, will there even be an America?
President's words have consequences.
It's an invasion. But how do you stop these people? You can't. There's no...
Remember last year in El Paso?
Run, we got run.
A racist manifesto posted online before the shooting claimed, quote, "This attack is a response to the Hispanic invasion of Texas."
That's an invasion.
It is an invasion.
This is an invasion.
These three words, repeated many times over at rallies, on Fox, and on Twitter, convinced a deranged white supremacist to drive 10 hours to find and kill as many Latinos as he could to help, according to him, stop the invasion. There are 32 million Latinos eligible to vote. Let's vote Biden to unite, inspire, and heal. Please vote and remember El Paso.
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Welcome back to LPTV and Vote for America. I am so excited to have our next guest here with us today. CJ Johnson is a Florida voter and a lifelong Republican who works for an evangelical megachurch. He will be voting for Joe Biden. Welcome to the show today, CJ. We are so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be with you and just excited to talk about some of these important things this afternoon.
Wonderful. You are a registered Republican, and you didn't vote for Trump in 2016. What was the moment during that last campaign that you knew you absolutely could not cast your ballot for him?
Well, Lisa, I'm telling you, it was a tough election year for all of us. For those of us who had poured so much time and energy into the Republican Party and conservative causes, I grew up a conservative. I served on the Kansas Teenage Republicans board. I helped out on the Rubio campaign. And when I heard Donald Trump brag about sexual assault, that should have disqualified him right then and there. And he continued to tear people apart, and he's continued that divisive rhetoric to this day. So, it's difficult to justify being an evangelical, being someone who wants to see our leaders value life and kindness and respect, and then see that as the person who was running in 2016. I did not vote for him.
Yeah, that was a tough moment for an awful lot of us, and I think many of us thought that was going to be a pivotal moment in the campaign, and it was a bit crushing when it turned out to not have the impact on so many people we expected it to. But this time things are going to be different. So can you tell us what you're doing this time around to make sure that Joe Biden wins?
Well, I think it's important for all of us to get involved. Look, I think many of us know people in our sphere of influence who, even though we're only 11 days out, are still on the fence. And it's time for us to have those difficult conversations and time for us to say, look, your vote matters and I want you to be involved in this election. What's it going to take to get you not only to show up and vote, but to show up and vote for Joe Biden? This year, I signed up to be a poll worker. I'm going to work with the election board this year. Of course, there was a call for people who are hopefully young and healthy to get out and do that. And so I'm going to be working here in Hillsborough County as an election worker. My mom back home in Kansas has done that for years. So I'm following a little bit in her footsteps and looking forward to doing that. But I think one of the important things for all of us, too, is to use social media in a kind, respectful way to not only help share truth, but to engage people who are still on the fence, like I mentioned. Earlier this year, I had the chance to meet Dr. Jill Biden when she was here in Tampa, right before kind of COVID hit. And I put up a Facebook post about meeting her and received a lot of feedback, a lot of very negative feedback from those in my circle who were conservative. But as time has gone on, I'm getting messages from people saying, thank you for what you're saying. And I think it's going to be really important for us to not only, like I said, have those difficult conversations, not only get out and vote and sign wave and phone bank and do all those things, but it's going to be important if there's a chance to work as an election poll worker to do so, but to talk to your friends and family about how to get out and make the right decision in this election.
That's such an important point that you're making. It's those difficult conversations are not going to end after this election. There's a lot of healing that this country is going to have to do, and practicing how to have those conversations now and do it in a respectful way is really important. And I applaud you for practicing that. You are employed by a faith-based nonprofit organization. So you were talking about how you've been speaking to voters. How are you speaking to your religious friends and family who are on the fence right now, and appealing to them to take another look at Joe Biden and maybe take a really clear look at Donald Trump?
Well, here's the thing. I understand that there's fear for those of us who have been lifelong Republicans about voting for a Democrat. I have heard it said that I can turn the other cheek, but I'm not going to turn a blind eye. And I think that should be one of our mottos going into the voting booth this fall. My faith teaches me that we value kindness, respect, empathy, dignity, that we seek to build bridges, not build walls, that we seek to bring people together and respect them for who they are. On one hand, in this election, we have someone who is a man of devout faith, and the other is a con artist. And the choice is very clear on who is going to help those of us in the faith community have the ability to continue to worship freely and to respect us and understand where we're coming from. I don't have to see eye to eye with Vice President Biden on every policy, but he is someone who consistently brings people together and builds consensus and helps move our nation forward in a positive direction. So I think talking with people that are people of faith and reminding them of our values, reminding them that these are the values that that we teach to our children, these are the values that we want to see in our leaders. There's clearly the right choice in this election for someone who's going to work to heal the divide, bring us together, and bring out the best in all of us.
Well, CJ, thank you so much for speaking with us today and for all that you are doing, both online and off. Being a poll worker is wonderful. We do need young, healthy folks like yourself to be out there to help protect our vulnerable citizens. So thank you for that, and thank you very much for being with us today.
Hey, thanks for having me, and looking forward to 2 weeks from now.
Thank you. Jennifer, it's so nice to hear another person talking about how to have those difficult conversations, but in a healthy, respectful way that invites people in instead of shutting them out.
And I just love the sincerity and how well informed this young man is, and the fact that this is a young man. You know, we talk a lot in politics about the future of the party and this party and that party and who are their demographics and who are their base. And something I've been saying for the past 4 years is, you know, the Republican Party isn't going to die if we lose a bunch of, frankly, angry, bigoted people from Donald Trump's base who are in their, especially those who are, you know, in their older years. We die if we cannot speak to young people. Political parties die when the next generation coming up into the political process reject you because you don't speak to their hearts, because you don't have the ideas and cannot bring to the debate, you know, the arguments that will move them. So to listen to this young man articulate so eloquently why it is he rejects Donald Trump and others in his, you know, others in his circle, I'm so impressed by it, and it really heartens me. It really gives me encouragement for the future.
Yeah, it does me too. He is exactly the kind of person who, in the Lincoln Project Men's spot that just came out, he is the person who we want to see. This is the type of young man who we want other young men to be like and to model for them. So it was really wonderful to have him.
And regardless, regardless of whether whether you see yourself as more of a liberal or more of a conservative or more of a Republican or more of a Democrat, regardless of that, to see this young man, you know, this is what we want to see from all of our sons and daughters as they, you know, come into adulthood and you know, make their own way in the world, that they bring this kind of integrity and thoughtfulness and character to their political decision making. I thought he was terrific.
Well, CJ gave us a whole long list of actions that we can all be taking between now and the election, but we wanted to share another important one with you. The Lincoln Project has recently partnered with csay2020.com, which is a platform to help report instances of voter suppression. And those come in a lot of forms. You can report any form of voter suppression, including voter intimidation, like this charming fellow is showing.
That's what Joe Biden said. Look, if you vote for me, I'm raising your taxes. So not only are you voting for war with Joe Biden.
So you can report that type of voter intimidation. You can also report things like misinformation, malfunctioning voting machines, and it's really easy to do. You just go to the website csay2020.com, select the type of incident that you've seen, write a quick description, put in the location, the time and date, add a photo or video if you have one available, and then just click submit. It's really very quick and easy. And then after you do that, you and voting officials and the media will be able to see exactly where and what is happening, so it can be corrected. As you can see, we're getting a lot of reports in already, so please join in. This is a participatory democracy that we have. We all need to be pitching in to make sure that we have a fair, healthy election, and that we trust the results and that every vote is counted. So csay2020.com, please check it out. We are going to take one more quick commercial break, and then we are going to come back with questions from you.
Our dads weren't perfect, but they did their best to raise us to be good, to be honorable, to be men of family and faith. But above all, they taught us to own up to it when we did something wrong.
No, I don't take responsibility at all.
Let me go. I don't wanna be your hero.
We may have thought we were doing the right thing in 2016.
Be a big man.
But it's clear this isn't the America we voted for.
Your masquerade.
We made a mistake.
I don't wanna be a part of your parade.
So it's time to own up, to be the men our dads raised us to be, and the fathers our sons need us to be. Because they're watching us the way we watched our dads. It's our turn to set the example. Vote for change. Vote for our sons. Vote for Joe.
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Welcome back to LPTV's Vote for America. We're going to hop right into audience questions now. Our first question is a tweet. And the tweet is, real clear that something is broken in the US. I'm wondering how you plan on getting young people interested in politics. Jennifer.
I have to say, I think it's going to happen pretty naturally when you think about the world that young people are living in right now. Think about what's happening if you're 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. So say you're going to be a first-time voter sometime in the next 2, 4, 6 years. How are you living? How are those kids living their lives right now? They are learning remotely. They have to wear masks everywhere they go. They're being socially distance, kept away from their social circles. In some parts of the country, they can't play sports. Many of them have lost loved ones, parents that, to the coronavirus. They have lost grandparents that they could not see one last time before they passed away, and are old enough to understand that people they loved were left alone in nursing homes, in ICUs. When you think about what they've been exposed to under this president, the bigotry, the racism, the assaults on the rights of LGBTQ Americans. These are things that this generation of Americans, young people, are very tuned into, very sensitive to. And then you add to that the degree to which their lives have been disruptive and damaged, their development has been affected by the impact of this president. I honestly think it's going to bring them naturally into a state of political awareness. Not necessarily that they're all going to become, big activists and carry signs and march and things like that. But I think that their sensitivity to it, that they're going to be much more keyed into the way that leadership has a direct and personal impact on their lives, and how and there's been what I like about it, if there's a silver lining at all, is that so much of the political conversation for these kids has become focused around character and leadership, not just disagreement, partisan disagreements. So I'm actually, I have a lot of faith in young people. I always have, and I think that the circumstances under which they're living today will probably naturally lead them into a state of political engagement and political education that might be uncommonly high.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I have two college-age sons, and they are certainly seeing their peers really engaged. And you're right; it's directly impacting their lives. I have one son who's studying remotely, another one who took a semester off from college because of how weird everything would be on campus right now, and it is having a direct impact. And they've been active. They've been out there protesting. We saw those marches, and they've been active with like really fun stuff, like responding to Trump rallies by buying up or reserving tickets like they did at the Tulsa rally. They just have a different way
Wasn't
of
that
being
hysterical?
active. That
I was so impressed
fantastic.
by that. I was so impressed by that.
They're going to get it done. They're going to get it done a little differently than our generation might have thought about doing it, but they're going to get it done. Let's go ahead to our next audience tweets. A tweet from California, assuming Biden wins. Oh, I'm sorry. Am I jumping ahead? Yes, I am.
No, I think that's right.
I'm not.
You're on
sorry.
the right one.
So
you got it.
Assuming Biden wins, and what can we do to create national unity? Russia, China, and Iran are all keeping up their tactics. We know we need to work harder. It's tough to spot them. How do we move past just never be friends with either a Democrat or a Republican?
Well, and let's start with that part of it. The very last line, how do we move past let's never be friends? I've never been that way. I've been very involved in partisan politics. I've never judged my circle of friends on their politics, and I've always had good friends who don't judge me on mine. So I hope that we haven't really lost that's kind of a temporary, very Trumpian sort of thing. But how do we become unified? This is sort of, that first question was about young people. How do we move past this election and become a more unified nation? That's on us. That's on those of us who are older, who have been through this, who have, an understanding of the danger of not being a unified country. And there are two different pieces of this in my mind. The first is, China, Iran, Russia. Yep, they're always going to try to influence not just our elections, but how we see and treat each other. Because if they can undermine Western democracy, then they win. So that's why these things that we've been doing on the show, how to spot a bot, how to kill a bot, actually, as he taught us a couple days ago. It's important for us to be informed. We can't say, gee, Facebook is a young person's landscape. That's not for me. We have to be informed. We have to know how to address those things as well. But there's another part of it is also, how do we become unified as a nation? I think the first step of that is we elect Joe Biden, and then Joe Biden has to take action. he has to go into office understanding that he has a he has an extraordinary responsibility on his shoulders, unlike previous modern day presidents. You know, maybe his is more comparable to the presidents that came the first few elections after the Civil War. And I don't mean to suggest that we are in a state, you know, that is equal to the Civil War, but we are awfully divided. So I feel like it's on Joe Biden, and then it's on all of us on both sides of the aisle to get in there behind him, to unite behind him. It'd be great if Joe Biden, if the first thing he did was form a nonpartisan task force to create a coordinated American response to the pandemic, you know, and bring everyone together and start putting out the right kind of information. And let's show Republicans and Democrats working together and advancing the right policies. And then maybe immediately after that, or side by side with that, something similar on addressing the rise of racism and bigotry in our country. Let's bring people of all colors and all political backgrounds and philosophies together at the table. I think if he goes in the office and immediately shows some of these really big steps, I actually think that that will help, and that will give the American people something that they can unite behind, and that will be the first step to returning us to having the kind of leadership in the presidency that the American people depend on.
And I think an awful lot of us are really yearning for that right now. I think it's one of the reasons that his appeal, you know, we heard him say it last night during the debate, that, you know, he's not going to be the president of just the blue states or just the people who support him. He's going to be the president of the United States and all the people in the United States. And boy, we need some of that right now. So let's go on to our audience email. Here's an email from a viewer in Louisiana. Republicans have registered more people than Democrats in battleground states. Is there a chance that this is 2016 all over again? So I know people have a lot of anxiety about this, but something that's really important to remember is that there was a huge voter registration drive before the 2018 election. And there were vast numbers of new Democrats and independents who registered before the 2018 election, which is part of the reason that we saw the House flip and Senate seats be picked up. So it's not just a 2016 versus 2018. We had that midterm election in there with a lot of voter registration. There has been a push with Republicans in the end, but the other thing that's really important to remember is registration isn't voting. So we can have all the people in the United States registered. It doesn't matter unless you are getting out and voting. So please get your vote in and make sure that you're encouraging friends and family, helping get people to the polls, and make sure that at the end of the day, we see a Biden-Harris victory.
Yeah, I'm confident we're going to at this point. As long as everybody executes the plan. You know, it's always, as long as, and you and I talked about, you know, early on when this show first started, we used to talk about you need a plan to vote, have a plan to vote. What day are you going? What hour? Are you taking the time off from work? Are you going with your neighbor? Are you taking your husband and your, you know, 22-year-old child? All those sorts of things. At this stage of the game, as long as we execute the plan, we're going to be okay. There's not this big surge of Republican registrations that have all come in the last 3 or 4 weeks, and suddenly they're turning out, you know, all these new Republicans that we haven't been counting. That is not what's happening. It's just stay steady. You know what you have to do. Get it done.
Yep, we're going to be okay. Let's go to our next audience tweet. We are. We're going to be okay. Breathe, everybody. Ralph and Aya tweeted us this question. Is it illegal to post a picture of your ballot? The answer is maybe, depending on what state you live in. So the safest thing to do is don't take a picture of your ballot. We've been encouraging people to send in their Vote for America, you know, hashtag Vote for America selfie pictures and post those on Twitter. But we want to see your faces. We want to see your faces with your I voted stickers on them. The ballot's not the important part. We trust you when you tell us that you voted for Biden and Harris. We don't need the documentation. But a little background on this. It's a 19th century law that makes this illegal in some states. It's very weird, has nothing to do with what we're doing, how we're living today, but it was intended to address things like corrupt union bosses or employers who were requiring their employees or union members to provide documentation that they had voted for the person that their employer was requiring them to vote for. So it really wasn't about sharing something on social media because we're talking about the 1800s. But the laws are still on the books. So until that changes nationwide, just don't take a picture of your ballot. And you all look so much better than your ballots anyway. So let's see those pictures.
It's the same actually, but like New Hampshire, it is legal to take a picture of your ballot. It wasn't a couple of years ago, but it's like so many other things that have to do with voting. It's state by state. Each state kind of has their own, whether we're talking about absentee voting and in-person voting, and so just be aware of what's happening in your state. Go to the best. Usually, anything to do with voting, the first place you should look is your Secretary of State office's website, and you can almost always find good information there.
Yep. I'm going to torture everyone with some additional reminders before we wrap things up here today. Again, get the selfies into us, your faces. They're wonderful. We want to see them, especially as we get closer to November 3rd. Please let us know the things that you want to hear us talking about. What are the questions that you have? You can put those on Facebook or comment when you're watching us on YouTube. You can tweet them. You can leave us voicemail messages and send email messages if you have something longer you want to say. Get those to us because we really, really do want to hear from you. We have voter registration deadlines coming up in a few states. We're going to show those one more time. I won't go through them, but please check and make sure you know what the voter registration deadlines are in your state. We have in-person early voting opening in one additional state, I believe, tomorrow. So in New York State, New Yorkers, get out and vote early and in person. We also encourage you, if you don't know those deadlines and the openings for early voting, go to vote.org. And you can find all the information that you need right there. And the last thing that I want to let everybody know about is that the Lincoln Project has a town hall that's going to be happening on Monday, the 26th. They are collaborating with the NAACP, the National Urban League, Black Economic Alliance, and Black PAC. For this town hall, it's at 7 p.m. on Monday. So please do join them. It's going to be a really wonderful event. Yeah. And that is a wrap for me for the day and for the week. So thank you very much, Jennifer. Thank you, everybody who has been here watching us, and have a fantastic weekend.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That's terrific. I'm really looking forward to that town hall. I'm going to be tuning into it as well. It's going to be hosted by Lincoln Project Senior Advisor Michael Steele, former RNC chair, who is also voting for Joe Biden this year, I want to say. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And of course, also thank you, as always, to all of our guests, Mike Madrid and Susan Del Percio and CJ Johnson. So happy to have everyone here. And before we send you out to enjoy your weekend, I was thinking this morning, I woke up this morning, I thought, it's Friday and the weekend is in front of us. We all are, the whole country is so concerned about what the future holds for us. And we know that we've all invested so much, not just time and effort, but emotion into this election. And before we go, I want to share with you the closing remarks from candidate Vice President Joe Biden from last night's debate.
I'm an American president. I represent all of you, whether you voted for me or against me, and I'm going to make sure that you're represented I'm going to give you hope. We're going to move. We're going to choose science over fiction. We're going to choose hope over fear. We're going to choose to move forward because we have enormous opportunities to make things better. We can grow this economy. We can deal with the systemic racism. And at the same time, we can make sure that our economy is being run and moved and motivated by clean energy, creating millions of new jobs. And that's the fact. That's what we're going to do. And I'm going to say, as I said at the beginning, what is on the ballot here is the character of this country. Decency, honor, respect, treating people with dignity, making sure that everyone has an even chance. And I'm going to make sure you get that. You haven't been getting it the last 4 years.
Let's go into the weekend focused on that, on what could be, on what the promise is for the future of our country. Hope over fear, relying on medicine and science and facts when we are making decisions. Just that we can have decency and character and integrity in leadership again. That's what I'm going to be thinking about this weekend, and I hope that all of you do as well. Enjoy the days ahead. I look forward to seeing you back here. Remember, we'll be here 5 days a week next week, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you so much for joining us at Vote for America on LPTV.
This is America, and it's hurting. Right now, we're getting knocked down by the very people who should be lifting us up. Our families and our neighbors are sick, and we're being lied to. They want to scare us into believing it has to be this way. It doesn't. In the past, when change was needed, we've stepped up. Now, it's time to step up again. This moment is not about Democrat or Republican. It's about being on the right side of history. We must set aside our differences, stand together, united, and ask, what can I do to help? It's time to put people ahead of politics, to put country over party. It's time to vote for America.
And this was never envisioned when we started the Lincoln Project, right? We started with an entirely different set of assumptions. We never saw a pandemic coming. 3 or 4 months into this project, COVID-19 hits. The president makes it clear he's not going to take this seriously, and he pressures Republican governors to do the same. So what happens is it hits in certain parts of the country, particularly on the coasts. And then as we go into summer, it hits the Sun Belt very, very devastatingly. And what we see then in the data shop is we start to notice that there's a correlation between the increase in infection rates in counties and the decline in Donald Trump's support numbers politically. In other words, when this became real to people in their real lives and in their communities, it was no longer avoidable. It wasn't abstract. It wasn't like Trump saying something on TMZ or kids in cages. It was not something that they saw in the news or they could easily avoid. It was happening to everybody. Everybody was sheltering in place. You're worried about your grandparents. Are the kids going to be affected? What is this thing? We don't know. Every American was affected by this.